There's a look at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and Chris Bassett working his way out toward the bullpen to stretch, get ready to face the Baltimore Orioles in a game you will see tonight on Sportsnet 1. Here is the big board presented by Bet365, and here's Blake Murphy, who knows that, and we're going to focus on the number 4 hitter, Matt Chapman here. He knows that in April, his weighted runs created plus was so high, it was essentially the productivity of 2 guys who were slightly above average. Something has changed. What is it?
A lot has changed when you go from being the best hitter in baseball over the month of April to having as tough a start to May and June as Matt Chapman has had. If we dig in, though, we start to see some stuff in the batted ball profile, and especially with how he's handled fastballs. Now, a big part of Matt Chapman's success early in the year was being able to use the entire field and go for power to the opposite field a little bit more. Now, pitchers seem to have adjusted to that. They're throwing him fewer fastballs, and when they do throw him fastballs, Chapman's struggling on them. Now, those two things do seem to go together a little bit. If you're trying to use the opposite field a little bit more, maybe those fastballs are a little harder to turn around on. He has pulled the ball a little bit less, but you see here in terms of exit velocity, he's still hitting the fastballs he gets to really well. Okay, well, what's the problem then? You see a huge spike in launch angle there, so how high he's hitting it in the air. His home run on the weekend was a great example. That was one of the highest home runs we'll see hit. Launch angle and exit velocity on their own aren't necessarily good just to have more. If you hit something really hard on the ground, it doesn't do a whole lot. So it's how those two things interplay together. We have something called damage rate to explain how those two things interplay together. 49% damage rate on his batted balls in April. That's down to 37 since April ended. That's a pretty big drop in damage rate.
And that was a pretty big home run for Chapman, as it turned out. Let's focus on the Orioles, specifically Gunnar Henderson, who has essentially been hiding in the shadows of Adley Rutschman since he's been a big leaguer, but not lately. Explain why.
And now he's at the top of the order. He's been so up and down this year that he's hit in every batting order position except Adley Rutschman's number 2 spot. So Gunnar Henderson, the best player in baseball over the month of June so far. A big part of that approach, and we heard Kevin Biggio talk to Arden Zwelling about this on Sunday a little bit too, is how do you go from being a very patient hitter to a patient hitter who's aggressive in the right spots? And to hear Gunnar Henderson tell it, it's been locating what his pitch is and what his zone is a lot more earlier in counts. You see he does a lot of damage on pitches low in the zone, and he's kind of locked in on those early in counts. If you're a Toronto Blue Jays pitcher, this is a different Gunnar Henderson that you saw earlier in May. It's kind of a new book on him because the book prior was you can get ahead in counts on him. He's very, very selective. Now he's willing to jump very early. You've got to be very careful with Gunnar Henderson at the top of this lineup now.
The Oakland A's had Ricky Henderson leading off. Tonight, the Orioles have Gunnar Henderson in that spot. And we've got Blake Murphy. So glad he could drop by. That is the big board presented by Bet365. Check out the app for the latest odds.